Hello and welcome to the session today. I've got the great pleasure today of talking to Mark Chong, Group CTO of Singtel, who's going to share his perspective and insight on the role that Singtel sees for 5G really growing the digital economy of Singapore. Welcome, Mark.
Thanks very much for having me, Gordon.
No, it's going to be a great conversation. We're limited on time, so let's go into the first question. So Singtel building the first national 5G network serving Singapore. 5G coverage to at least half of Singapore by the end of 22, and nationwide coverage by 25. So you're really leading the way on that. What's been the approach that you've been taking, and perhaps a little in terms of the challenges and the learnings so far?
I think the main challenge that we have is really, if we look at 5G today, there are not really many new use cases at this moment. So we are quite happy to be taking a bit of a gradual approach, we will say. You know, Singapore is not a big place, 700 square kilometers. To cover 50% in 2 years, that gives us some time to try out new use cases. And then, of course, 50% over about 4 years or 5 years, that really hopefully will give us time to develop new use cases. Right now, we are happy to be doing trials with partners. On the enterprise side especially, we're doing trials with the Port of Singapore Authority. We are doing trials with an advanced research lab that's focused on Industry 4.0. So we are experimenting with how 5G could work with robotic arms on the factory floor, for example. And on the consumer side, we are testing cloud gaming with some companies. The whole idea there is to leverage on the very low latency of 5G and perhaps promote a new generation of cloud games.
And Singtel, I think, has talked a bit about taking much more of a different approach, and those use cases might be a great example to talk a bit more about in terms of 5G versus the one you took with 4G, really moving beyond the access. How have you had to change the way you work with those kind of customers?
Very good question, Gordon. I think 5G actually gives us a lot of transformational capabilities versus 4G. You know the attributes of 5G: a lot faster speed, a lot lower latency, much denser deployment of devices, right? But I think one major attribute of 5G is that all the network elements become programmable. So what this means is that we then have the ability to orchestrate from the radio transmission to the core to enable use cases for enterprises especially. So we will be able to expose control elements of the network, interweave this with an enterprise production applications via APIs, and hopefully with this integration, we can enable automation, integration that raises productivity for our enterprise customers or any business partners for that matter. So in the era of 4G, you know, we were talking about, in the prior generations of mobile technology, we're talking about voice minutes, and then we talk about data packets in 3G and 4G. And with 5G, we hope we will be able to develop use cases that depend on very low latency, assured latency. Yeah. So these are the things we're looking at.
Those kind of different characteristics that there is around 5G. Have you got any thoughts on how effectively you're seeing the monetization of that change? I guess people understand how they can buy the traditional kind of like services But how are you seeing the monetization, the kind of BSS capabilities having to evolve to support your business where it's going?
Yeah, I think very good question again, Gordon. So as I've mentioned, so in prior generations of mobile technology, telcos like us, we metered voice minutes, and then we started measuring, data packets. In 5G, we certainly hope that we will have new drivers of value, such as assured latency, perhaps API, the transactions of API very much
That's a good point.
the way some of these companies, API-based companies, are doing. When they develop APIs and the ecosystem uses them. So the thing is, we are really entering a bit of a brave new world because the technology and the capabilities are there. However, the industry hasn't quite settled on the right drivers to meter or to charge for value. So I think there's a bit of exploration going on right now. Hopefully, telcos around the world will settle on a suitable model.
And are you seeing any that you mentioned, like the ports work that you're doing and the factory automation? Are you seeing any of that settling happen, or is really just an exploration stage in terms of the customers today?
I think probably still exploration for a couple of years. However, commercial trials, meaning trials for which some customers are willing to pay because they know that such trials do require some form of investment. Some commercial trials are happening across, at least in Singapore, yes.
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting. Oh, sorry, please go.
No. So we hope also via such trials to develop the right commercial models that's suitable, not just, of course, for the telcos, but more importantly, that are relevant to the customers as well.
Yeah, and that customer point, actually, just picking up on that, it's have you seen, as you've been working through those trials, the relationships changing between you and between Singtel, and those customers? Have you felt an evolution in terms of the relationship side of things as well? Because it's really about their business and getting closer to that.
Certainly, this is a very interesting journey that's evolving and developing. What is certain is that I think, network equipment vendors such as Ericsson have developed the capabilities, and we are deploying them. Telcos like us, we are deploying them. And thankfully, we have developed that network software capability to talk about API integration with enterprise customers. And amongst our customers, we noticed that there are actually early developers, some who think very long-term and can see the need for such integration between their business applications and ours so that they can elevate themselves to a different level of capability.
Yeah.
And then there are others who, while they understand our capability, still need to go through a phase of reinvention, redevelopment, or re-engineering of their processes and capabilities.
So I think it's how you connect to the process side.
On that point. Just to complete on the point. So we do require customers to see us, Singtel, Ericsson, to work together to develop new ways of engineering their businesses, as well as therefore use cases.
I think it's an interesting point. Just quick follow up on the kind of we touched briefly there the monetization, I guess, side of things, but there's a lot of talk in the industry around the potential revenue in B2B enabled by 5G. often we forget also, and Singtel as a company has a significant B2C base, and perhaps just touching a little bit in terms of that connection to 5G and the B2C as well. How are you seeing that evolve? The balance of revenue, I guess, the balance of relationships. Are you seeing that change in your business today?
I suppose I'll answer that in a couple of points. First, I think today the consumer use cases are still very much dependent on faster download speeds. It's a case of with 5G for sure we get faster download speeds, but 5G is of course very much more than that. I do think that there are two possible ways of evolution in the consumer use cases. The first one, you mentioned, we are quite clear 5G is suitable for B2B, but that will evolve into B2B to C. So in the example I gave earlier about cloud gaming, I could well see a case of as we develop edge capability, a cloud gaming company might wish to host their games on our edge and therefore assures its users, its customers of extra low latency while playing its game. So then it becomes a case of B2B to C. And further out, the second scenario, which I've talked about in other occasions, is that I think once the network is built, we are waiting, or we are in a moment of waiting for the next revolution in devices form factors. With that, all that capabilities and evolution of technologies in hardware, in other software, devices will change completely. So I talked about, I think we are waiting for the so-called iPhone moment, someone out there putting together, perhaps another Steve Jobs putting together all that technology into a fantastic device like, the iPhone, the iPad, so that when it happens and that's displayed, we know it is a completely different ecosystem that might change our lives altogether again.
It's a really interesting point, whether it's going to be one of these things which are in our ears, both our ears, as we listen to this conversation. But yeah, how people interact, I guess, engage with the services is going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
Perhaps going back, you made a point earlier in terms of orchestrating service. And perhaps in a way linked to that gaming one, how do you see the complexity of that really coming together? Because it's really quite interesting in terms of who, as much as anyone can ever own a relationship with a customer. In that gaming example, is it important that Singtel has that relationship? Are you quite relaxed in terms of orchestrating it behind the scenes, but the relationship being someone else's? How much of that do you spend time thinking about?
Well, I think in terms of providing services to customers, Singtel, we are a full-fledged operator, meaning we engage the whole spectrum of customers from the prepaid customer all the way to the high-value premium enterprise customers. Today, we play in that whole spectrum.
Yeah.
Of course, we are guided by being able to deliver value to the customers, and we do intend to continue doing that. So in terms of having to orchestrate the network and deliver value to customers, we are also fully conscious that we do not have all the capability. We need to work with partners, especially in the world that's evolving so quickly. Not just us, we think everybody has to be very open with working with other partners to put together the capability so that we can present what's meaningful and useful to the end customer.
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. I think it is going to be really interesting, though, to see how the different positionings evolve over the next few years. And going back to the orchestration point, though, if I can, how many different components do you see that? I mean, you talked about the edge, you talked about the communication services coming in. Do you see yourself taking a position where you go really quite deep into potentially some of these industries?
Well, I do not know what I don't know. So I do not know how deep the various industries get into. But within Singtel, we do have a bit of a blueprint. We see the future as for our networks, as we call that the Singtel Networks 5.0. 5.0 for two reasons. One is because it's to deliver 5G. Another reason is because there are 5 pillars of capabilities to build. One is advanced access, the very high speed, and then programmable transport, and then the smart virtualized core. So those are the first 3 pillars that telcos are generally quite comfortable with. The 4th pillar is about smart orchestration. So it's a capability on, orchestrating the first 3 pillars, since they are now programmable. And then the 5th pillar is about exposing the network controls to integrate with enterprise or, business partners. So we see these 5 pillars, and we are working with various partners, strategic partners like Ericsson, to deliver that transformation.
I think the API one, you've touched upon it on a number of places there, and obviously we're talking here in relation to the TM Forum and some of the API activities both organizations involved with there. I think it's a really interesting evolution that we're going through in terms of how customers will access our services via those kind of APIs. Slightly uncertain, but interesting, I think.
Yes, very much so. So we are adopting TM Forum's APIs for some of our platform work. So because it's easy, it's convenient, and it's relevant to many of us here.
Yeah, absolutely. We're running a little bit out of time now. Perhaps a final question, if I can. I started by sort of like saying, okay, the kind of coverage you're going for into Singapore, and I guess what excites you most over the next time period coming up in terms of what it's going to engage and the way in which it's going to, I guess, change Singtel as well. What excites you personally the most in what's coming up?
What I find very exciting is this whole development of new capabilities for a telco like Singtel, the network software capability, the exposure of our network APIs again. And I think when we are able to successfully integrate all that capability and leave the control with a paying customer, I think that will be at least a destination arrived. Yeah. So looking forward to that. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great point and a great one to end on in terms of, effectively putting the control with the customer, effectively giving them the power. It's a really good point. So I'd like to really thank you for your time today, Mark. I think it's been really interesting hearing where Singtel's going, and let's hope as these 5G services start to really engage, that the values there and the monetization options are there to take us all forward. So thanks again for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me again, Gordon. Thank you.